The reason we came to America is my dad was just fed up with the communist system. And when he gave me my name, I was his firstborn. And the reason it was George, not Georgia, is because George is a British or American name. And to him, it was this: I'm going to America no matter what. This is 1974. And my kid needs to have a name that fits in that culture. Later on, I figured every time he would call my name, it would just be a reminder that he promised God and his family that he's going to leave. So I'm leaving something pretty good, pretty solid, pretty firm for an unknown, right? When we got to Portland, that really shocked me was how many people waited for us. And we're like heroes, you know. Now, when we left Romania, we left tears behind on an airplane and we're headed to an unknown. And so popping out of that airplane, besides the music and the brass and the this and the that, it was just my dad, like the simple man that we knew that did it all for us later on the line, and he was waiting for us, you know? You're very much limited as a human being under communists. Everybody pretended it was nice. Everybody pretended it was good. It's ironic that Romanians say that we in the West now have that fake smile. All Romania was fake. It wasn't just a smile. So I asked my uncle, who was a pastor, I go, Uncle John, what would you recommend I do? He goes, simple. You have to go meet the people that God's going to use in your generation, and they have to meet you because God's going to use you in this generation. He gave me a challenge. As the service was over, I had that ringing in my ear. I got to meet the people and they got to meet me.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of Make Your Life Count. Today, I have with me a very dear friend of mine. I guess you could say I say that in many episodes, but this is really hits close to home. Somebody that really embodies this motto of Charity Cup and the name of the show called Make Your Life Count. We believe as Charity Cup that you make your life count by investing in two things, God and people. And by people, I mean people's souls, because they're the only ones that could last forever. So that's why we believe you should invest your life in that. So we feature stories about that. And today we have an awesome story we bring you from my dear friend George Puraci, who many of you probably already know. George is also on the board of Charity Cup, and not only on the board, but is involved in Charity Cup for many, many years. I guess you could say pretty much from the very beginning. And before that, he was involved in Mission One. He's also a professor. But I want to also tell you guys that the reason I find this story very unique is because I feel George embodies serving and helping people in wherever capacity, wherever they're at, whether they come in and they need help with their car, whether he finds them on the street somewhere. I've ran across him helping people in so many situations. So we'll kind of talk about some of those, which are not captured in a profession or in a role. They're really just embodied in everyday living. So hello, George. Welcome to the podcast. And I feel like you don't need an introduction because you've been part of the show from the very beginning. We talked about it many times. So welcome.
Hey, thank you for the privilege. Um it's finally a good time for me to join the show. I'm sorry I missed the first few episodes, but I obviously it's recorded. I can go back and be part of that. But it's a joy to be here. Also, the bigger joy is just to be part of your life, part of our ministry for the many years that we were doing life together, making it count, man. And we're still adding slowly days to this life that God gave us.
Absolutely. So, I mean, the audience doesn't know this, but we actually kind of recorded this at one point, sort of as a sample back in the day when, I don't know, we didn't have so many episodes under our belt yet. So you're kind of like the first guy that jumped on and said, "Hey, let's do it." And I can go first if you want me to. So I really appreciate that. So you really are not a guest. I would say you're part of this project. So thank you for that. Now, George, as I always start, just to get the audience familiar with who we're talking to, maybe like a short resume of where things are at with you today. It doesn't have to be just from a professional standpoint, from it could be from a personal standpoint. So if you can kind of catch us up and kind of why we're talking today. And
All right.
if you don't tell us enough, I'm gonna make sure to jump in. So make sure you.
Ask any questions. I'll try my best to do a quick resume. It happens to be around Valentine's Day, and I was kidding with my wife. We've been married for almost 18 years, so I'm a happily married man to Kaylin. You've been married for a while when instead of doing the traditional dinner and whatnot, we ended up going to Target, buying toys for the kids, and having a very beautiful night in its own right. So happily married man, three children, 2, 5, and 15, and that's the home life where I'm always. That's where I start every day, and that's where I end every day. It's in the home. And then when I leave this place, generally speaking, my son is just now learning the calendar, and he keeps on asking, "Is it Monday? Is it Thursday? Is it Monday? Saturday?" It's all big mumbo jumble. And I told him, "Look," and I did a calendar for him. I did a calendar spread. This is when we go to church. This is when we go to youth group. This is when you go to Awana. This is when Tati goes to work. So I would say, as all people, as all men, we're responsible to be not just at home, but when we leave the home, to do meaningful things, things that count. So my profession, my 27 years I've been teaching, teaching science. It's a story of itself, but it's a beautiful story where every day I face other people's children, and I do my best to be their best role model, moral leader, but also a teacher of science and many more things than that. So that's my nine to five, if there is such a thing. But that's my daily. That's how I earn my income. But I've also been privileged to be part of the Romanian San Bernardino Church, which is called Elim, since 1984. So our church is now celebrating 40, I don't know, 42 years, 43 years. We're going to go on 44 pretty soon here. And it's 43 years, I should say. And it's been a privilege to be part of that small community. As budding, as ebbing and flowing as it was over the years, it's still small, and that's where I serve in a capacity of a assistant pastor. I help with whatever music and other needs that the church has. I'm still a youth leader after all these years, and because the church is older, and we have a lot of people with white hair and graying hair and a lot of wisdom. I'm still a youth at 51, so there you go. I'm 51 and I'm a youth. It's beautiful. And then, of course, the ministry side of things, I've been involved in some wonderful parts. Charity Cup is the latest and greatest, and the only thing that I'm 100% gung for right now. It's a ministry we've been privileged to do since 2000 with men and women across the world. And prior to that was Mission One for a good 10 years with the same guys that we're doing Charity Cup with, but that was the initial phase of ministry. And I would suppose I can answer questions, but that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, if you were to look at it from, like I said, if you're writing down sort of roles like former roles, that sounds good. But I think there's this part of it that a lot of people know you, or I know you, and that maybe if they're watching this, they can comment. But they probably know you in this very informal role of a friend, of a counselor, of uh, a guy that just jumps in and helps whatever capacity, whether it's about cars or I've had, you've been buying people tickets to I don't know where with strangers. So I want to dive into some of those stories that are untold because I
Sure.
believe um, making a life count is not only about the sort of role that you do every day. It's really sort of the professional role. It's really about what you do in your daily life, and it could be in your family, it could be with your friends, and it could be just people that you don't even know, and it's never going to be written about it anywhere. So I think that's a big part of it, and so that's why I think you embody that.
What I share with you is what I call the main quests, the main course, the things that I live for and are on a calendar, if you would. But here's the joy of just walking with God and just being ready. Just a couple nights ago, I was with my daughter who's 15, very bright, and she's very creative. And I asked her, "Hey, Colby, we were just asked to go pray for a lady who's on hospice. She was diagnosed. She was going to die in the next couple of days, and it was a long day for both of us, and we just got back from church, and I'm like, instead of doing homework, it was 9:30. You want to come with me? She goes, "Yeah, man, I love side quests with you, you know?" And that phrase just really hit me because we have the main quest, which we can put on a calendar, but I think God honors and delights and takes us on side quests more than we would imagine if we allow Him to. And these side quests to me are the spice of life, right? You don't need spices as a main course, but without the spice, the main course is pretty bland, right? So, anyways, I said side quest. I love it. Let's do a side quest together, and we did many side quests together, me and her. But I would like to thank everyone I'm uh, a friend with, and I walk, this earth with in this time and space, man. It's really kind of cool to do side quests, just to be ready for that extra, on top of the main course. And that's the delight. That's the spice of life. And I've been privileged, and I have so many stories that are just exciting, and I gain a lot from them. But I think at the end of the day, God just wants us to be ready and available and then he'll just throw in a side quest here and there, and just to spice things up.
Yeah, man, George, you have some awesome expressions that have remained with me for many many years, and some of them I borrowed from you, whether you no whether you let me or not. Like anyway, this side quest is another one that I probably will remain with me for a while. The carrot illustration, maybe we'll touch upon in this podcast. But anyway, I that's awesome. So I was curious. So you guys went.
Yeah, it's a longer story. Let me tell you just in a few seconds. That same day, after 27 years of teaching, I have this girl. She's precious. She's a senior. She's at that time when she's checked out. She walks up to me and simply says, "You know what, Mr. Puraci, nobody listens to you." And I'm like, wow. When somebody offers you such a bold statement, it's either A, I also look at the sources where it comes from. It could be a temptation from the devil to kind of knock you off your course. It could be B, God saying, up your game because you're kind of bland. Or it could be just a random statement that I can ignore or but I took it as a statement that was not to be ignored. So the whole day I was kind of tired and worried and thinking, man, am I at that stage in life which I always feared is to be irrelevant, right? Where my life would not count or would not matter, where my hours, my days, my words, my presence, it's just it doesn't it's nobody's listening, right? And as a person that speaks both in my calling and in my profession, that was shocking. So I didn't know how to take it. And I said, Lord, please, for whatever it's worth, guide me so I know how to take this statement. The whole day I was worried, thinking about it. Again, worried in the sense that I might have hit that age where I'm irrelevant. At night we had youth group and there was a nice 20 young people that were listening and they're ready to listen. So they were listening. Then that lady calls and says, "Can you please come?" And I said, "Sure." So I asked God how to prepare. I had a couple of seconds to pray. I looked at some verses and I show up in the house of random strangers on a Thursday night. She's dying of cancer. The family's around her and they stop, they pause. And it's not because I'm there, it's because they call me to pray. I'm representing some hope and I'm representing God who through whatever words I have, they're willing to listen. So they all listened. I've never met these people before or since. So we grab hold our hands and we are now on a side quest. We're surrounding their mom and their grandma and we're praying and I'm praying and I'm like, man, what is really interesting, and I'll get to this in a second. And then a couple days later, I was at a baby dedication a couple miles from the same spot. And there's half Filipino, half Romanian. This is a family have been involved with many things in their life. And I forgot about this thing. Too many things going on. I was at a friend's house with the family, and I get a text, "Are you coming?" And I said, "Oh shoot!" I got dressed. So I'll be there half hour. Showed up, and the Seattle Seahawks were playing. It wasn't the Super Bowl, but it was the one of the a win away from Super Bowl. And everybody was watching. I didn't know most of them, and there was like 40, almost 50 people. And I walk in, I'm like, "Oh man, these guys are not going to walk away from the TV to hear a man speak about a baby and dedicate a baby in the backyard." Again, a couple miles from where that lady was dying, this baby was being brought to life or dedicated to life. Within, like, I'm not kidding, within 2 seconds, I'm sorry, 2 minutes of getting there, they shut off the TV, everybody assembled. It was like a bunch of ants got together, and all of a sudden the backyard the seats were already arranged because they were waiting. And I apologized and I look and there's like 40, 40 to 50 set of eyeballs blinking, waiting for me to speak. This is all within the 2 days of that girl saying nobody's listening to you. And I'm like, wow, the Filipinos, the Romanians, the people that I didn't assemble that I even forgot about to my shame, right? Or to my busy schedule. No excuse, but I forgot. I promised I would show up. And it was like a month and a half ago when I promised. And all of a sudden, God is saying, people are listening, but the question is, do you have something to say? And in all these situations, I really just depended on God to say, what would you have me say, Lord, to these people, right? Because there's different audiences for different reasons. We had a good moment there. I prayed over the baby, the family, and it was just a great time. And they left their game to stop and listen to God. And I was honored to have been able to speak on behalf of God, to say some words of inspiration and hope for the family and the children, and also of warning, for the baby of what's coming and what they should do and how they should approach this awesome responsibility. So all those three things to me was God saying, "Listen, you're not done talking, but do you have something to say in different venues and different situations?" Again, the side quest story. You may be called to speak where you don't expect it or where you think you're most needed. Maybe don't put too much in that basket. So I still get paid to teach and I love it. And I think that was just a test to see. But I think beyond the teaching, beyond the main course, we have as a ministry and as individuals also have to be ready for moments of that, where God just surprises us and asks us, "Are you willing to speak on my behalf? And are you willing to say what I want to say?" So just be available. And that was kind of a neat illustration. Now, there's more to say on that, but going back to what I was saying with the lady that was dying, it was kind of neat how God gave me the words to say, the words to pray, and at the end of the day, I benefited as much as the people present. And I walked away saying, "Thank you, Lord." It was a good reminder that you still speak. God is always speaking. And apropos of listening, when that girl said nobody's listening, I realized even if we get to the point where nobody's listening to us, don't we have that great privilege just to wherever we happen to be, close our eyes or bow our heads or bow our knee and say, God, you always listen. And he says, if a sinner prays, the Lord listens. If a person in despair prays, the Lord listens. Like there's not a time when the Lord doesn't listen to us. And that's just amazing. It shook me to the core. No matter if people will eventually stop listening to me, I always have God who's willing to listen. And the question is, I guess to me, I pose it to myself, am I talking to God? And when I talk with him, he's not just listening, he's actively speaking. So it's kind of fun to have that exchange of, hey, I'm listening to you, but now listen to me as I conclude your prayer or answer your prayer or move your prayer along. So that was a lesson for me. But it's got sparked with that girl walking up to me and saying, nobody's listening to you anymore. God is
Hmm.
among it, the most important of all. And then everything else is just, again, icing on the cake. But God is always listening to us.
Yeah, really cool. So I wanted to ask you, George. So this family you're saying you didn't even know. So it's not related to the girl that mentioned that. It was just another
It
sort
was
of a
just a
random.
random, yeah, it's my niece. She's getting married into the family. And it happened to be the coworker of her future mother-in-law. So she said, "Hey, she wants to reach out to you." She reached out to me, texted me, and I go, "It's late." She goes, "Do not worry, they're waiting." So yeah, I got them like at 10 o'clock at night, and it was a house of sorrow, but at the same time, when we speak of the hope of afterlife and eternity, that can be also transformed. So I think we left with a lot of hope, even though she passed away a couple days later. I think they really the moment was special because the next day they took their mom out and the two of them that were gonna get married in, like, April, they decided to move their wedding on the lawn that next day so the mom can see it, and she was a witness. They took her out in a bed and but the point is, I don't know if the prayer itself made a difference, but the mom didn't die that night or the next night. She lasted for another week, and they had a chance to do the wedding, and there was a lot of hope and joy, and I saw the pictures and I heard the stories afterwards. So I was just a small cog in this bigger machine that God was turning, and he's not done with his family. By far, he's not done with it.
So George, you saying so they were expecting her to pass sort of in those
Yeah, she
moments,
was
and
on
then
hospice. Yeah, which meant like we can mean a couple of hours to a couple of days. She was
gotcha.
told she's gonna
Mhm.
die. Yeah, very advanced
Yeah.
cancer and very much pain.
Yeah, again, me knowing you going there does not surprise me at all. So I was curious though, how did Kobe respond to that, or what was the takeaway?
Um, she was very quiet, reserved, but also present. So it was kind of neat that for the first time, she's 15 now. I've always had a friend, as you know, Bora. We've been through thick and thin for all these years, and it's always been the joy to share these moments. Doing them alone is not my forte. I like being with someone, and I had no one. I thought about it, man. I have no one to call at this hour, this late, and this urgent. So I looked at her. I go, Kobe, can you come? And she said yes, and I think being there to her, it was fun to have her as a sidekick, if I can use that word, but also to have her to learn, and also I asked her to pray. So she was quietly praying, she was observing, and then I asked her for some feedback uh, on how does she read the room? How does she read the people? And what does she gain out of it? Ultimately. I learned that in Africa when after we speak in Africa, the pastor always asks, aha, so let's see what you learned. And people stand up one after another and they say, I learned this from the pastor.
Yeah,
And the next thing they do, they say, I'm gonna do this from what I learned. So I learned that from them and I asked Colby, what did you learn and what can we do forward going forward? And of course the going forward is she wants to do more of this. She wants to be part of this, which is kind of cool. I never thought she'd want to be part of going to sick people's home. At 15, that's not something the young folk look forward to. But
well,
she liked it.
this reminds me of a verse that it's better to be in a house of sorrow than a house of
Yes.
partying. I don't know exactly the
Yes,
translation in English, but um, you probably do, right? But the idea, I think, is that when you go into a house of sorrow where people are hurting, you get to reflect on your own life, and it just makes you a better person. I guess the
I think
way it
so. Yeah.
brings you closer to God. So, but to bring a teenager into that situation, I can't imagine the usefulness of that because if you at an early age you begin to become a lot wiser, I would say. I don't know.
Ah,
So
yes. Yeah, Solomon said that, and obviously it's true, and, we've all experienced, and I think Kobe has experienced enough in her life to know that those moments matter. But, she had all the whole right to say, "Look, I have homework. It's due tomorrow, but let's do it some other time," you know? But she actually encouraged me because when she said yes, I said yes to the lady because she said I can go in the morning, but it was important that we go that night because the next morning they did this, outside.
yeah.
They went to do the wedding. So maybe the night before she was not in pain, she was okay. We prayed and whatever. However God worked, we worked that it worked the next day for the wedding. The makeshift wedding on the front yard. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that's it. Anyway, like I said, it doesn't surprise me knowing you to do something like this. But I want to get to the point of how did you get to the point to sort of do these spontaneous things that you do? And I want to kind of be rewind a little bit and go back to sort of where things started, the journey. Where did it start? How did you instill these values, and so on and so forth. Long story short, where are you from? And give us a little bit of insight into your sort of early life.
Yeah. So I was born in Romania, in Karasebes, back in 1974, and I lived in Romania until 1983 when we came to America. The reason we came to America is my dad was just he fed up with the communist system, and when he gave me my name, I was his firstborn a year and a half after he got married. He did not name me George, but he named me George. So George was my grandfather's name, who had already passed away when my mom was 14. But in his honor, they named me George. And the reason it was George, not George, is because George is a British or American name. And to him, it was this: I'm going to America no matter what. This is 1974, and my kid needs to have a name that fits in that culture. So
Mm,
George, I am, because of that, which is kind of neat. Later on, I figured every time he would call my name, it would just be a reminder that he promised God and his family that he's going to leave. So it was kind of uh, a conveyor belt pushing him forward. It's time, it's time. And in 1981, he defected. We were left, obviously, myself, my brother Nick, and Lavi were left behind with my mom. There's three of us, and a year and a half later, we're reunited in Portland, Oregon. So we started in America in Portland, Oregon, 1984. I'm sorry, 1983, and it was around Valentine's Day, which is exactly where we're at right now as we make this recording. And I remember coming to America and I saw flowers everywhere. And I was like, man, and it was Valentine, Valentine, Valentine. This is a nice little thing on the name. Now, my uncle's name is Valentin, and he lived with my dad. There's four men that defected together, and we were the first family to join. So, in my heart, for the longest time, I thought, man, my uncle's the greatest. He bought all these flowers for all of us, like he got the flowers, not my dad. My dad never claimed the credit, but later on, he told me the mystery, and I figured it out. Actually, I'm like Valentin. It wasn't him. It was actually my dad, but he bought him for Valentine's because that's when we came to America. And
mm,
anyways, we came to Portland, Oregon, stayed for a year. We moved to California in '84, and I've been in California since 1984. So same place, same valley that we moved to back then. Here we are. It's our little sandlot of fun and activities, and
yeah.
we've been here ever since. Yeah,
So George, I wanted to just for the audience to explain a couple of things. So the typical Romanian, so Gheorghe and George are the same name, but he
yeah,
chose to give you the American version, not the Romania version of the name, because he was anticipating immigrating to the U.S., right?
yes,
George
of
is an
course,
American version. Gheorghe would have been hard for anybody to spell. You would have had to change your
yes.
name probably. So, so anyway, interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. So you pretty much sort of lived by faith here.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
exactly.
yeah, yeah. That so it's one thing when you just say, you kind of wish and you hope, but it's another to like take steps towards it.
Oh, yeah, he
So
planned it for sure. Yeah.
okay, so your dad leaves, you guys are left behind. Do you remember? I don't know, where are you in the family? The oldest, the youngest? How many are you
I
guys?
am I'm the firstborn of 6. We have 3 in Romania at the time. I was, 7 when my dad left. My brother Nick was 4 years younger. He was 3, all going on 4. And then my sister Lavi, she was just a couple weeks old. She was just born, so he left a newborn. And by the way, the day he left, he took us to the park, beautiful park in the center of our little town, and we walked. I still remember the feeling because it was shocking. It got seared in my memory as I realized the next day my dad's not coming back. And so I remember the park, walking in the stroller. It was just a beautiful, afternoon, summer afternoon, um, and then he just went to have a coffee with some of the men. That was their sign. They entered the coffee shop. The whole story is beautiful, and at some point you're going to interview him. But he entered the coffee shop one way, had some coffee, and exited through the back, and never
Hmm.
came back. Basically left for Austria.
I think that's an interesting story. We do plan to interview him because I love
Yeah.
those type of stories. But so George, how old were you at the time? And did you? So you had no clue. Obviously, your mom probably did.
No, my mom did. She was the only person I knew because obviously there was a lot of repercussions that could happen. Even to her, she did not know when he would leave. So they had basically he the point is she knew he's going on a mountain hike, and that was the official story with his friends. She knew he's gonna leave, but those mountain hikes happen pretty often or whatever, the time with his friends. So she didn't know exactly when. And when it did happen, it was you know, my dad was pretty straightforward. Like he said, he's gonna send a postcard, and he did within a very short time. He got a postcard. We got a postcard, and he called, and so it was official. But the point is, the kids had no idea. None of us knew. None of his parents. My dad's parents didn't know. My grandparents, nobody knew. It was all shock. But of course, the pieces fall together when he doesn't come back from his mountaineering in a day or 2 or 3. You realize, okay, this is it. It has happened. Though we knew it's gonna happen, we had no idea when.
I mean, it sounds like a movie, honestly. So we definitely got to tell the story from his side.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you this is you're in a park and you're
yeah.
saying he just goes in the shop. You guys are watching him from a distance as they're drinking
Yeah,
coffee.
Yeah, exactly. He took his there is not just us, it was another family that was with us. And him and the father of that family, his friend, they went to have a coffee together. They often did this. It was not uncommon. So they did everything very platonic, very basic, very
Yeah.
much if somebody was watching, it's just another day that we've done hundreds of times the same scenarios. So they went to the same coffee shop, but what I didn't know, I found out later with the coffee shop is they knew the person that worked there and they knew how to access the back. So even if they were being followed from a distance, they entered but never left the coffee shop because they exited through a different route. And so basically they entered the front and never came out of the front again. So that was to us. And then of course the day went on and we went home and that was pretty normal. It wasn't abnormal. What I'm saying, everything was normal. It was planned to be normal day, but it was something that I would say as a young man rocked me. Um, I Man, I never had a yearning or the Romanian word dor in my heart until then. I didn't know what that meant. And then he would send songs actually from Austria. There was a guy that would sing, and uh, those songs like would remind me of my dad. And it was interesting because he would sometimes we would get like a tape, sometimes we would get like packages with food. And anybody that lived through that time, we did not have sweets or gum or candy or the smells of freedom. All
Yeah.
that food, even to this day, when I smell like the gum or some of the soaps or some of the confections that my dad sent, some of the chocolates, it transports me almost 50 years back or 40, whatever, 43 years back, 44 years back to those days. But anyways, we would get packages and the packages would tell us, hey, your dad's in a better place. But each package would also tell us one day you're going to be in that better place. So it's kind of like how God interjects in our lives now and again. We get these glimpses of heaven or an open window for a second or just a yearning to go somewhere we've never been. We've never been, but we know Jesus is there, right? He's went to prepare a place for us and he sends gifts, right? There's the gifts of the spirits. There's the gifts that every good and perfect gift comes from the Father of lights. So we get these gifts and it smells of heaven. It smells different in this world. And every time we get one of those, I get one of those gifts or we get one of those gifts, it should send our spirit and mind, man, that place is there. It doesn't smell like earth. It's much, much, much more glorious. So to me, that contrast between the bleak and the dark and the lack that we had in Romania at the time to these packages that were so rich and so like colorful and the smells were like just a plethora of smells. I can't describe. Each one smelled different, but they're all boxed in a box, and it was just overwhelming to all the senses. And in the heart was this yearning to see my dad, and one day knowing I will see my dad. I just had to be patient and wait because the promise is there. It's just a matter of time between the moment and when it's going to happen. And those packages were just reminders, you know?
Hmm. This is sounds a lot like metaphoric to
Yeah, for
heaven in
sure.
some ways, right? You're waiting to see the Father. But
Yeah.
anyway, okay, so it sounds like I don't want to. There's probably a lot to discuss here, which I would
Go
love to
go
talk.
as fast as you want in whatever direction. I'm good.
Yeah, but I do want to have this conversation with your dad, because I think it's very interesting. But I want to talk about a little bit more how it impacted you, and maybe so at this point you're pretty young. It sounds like you guys immigrated to the States not long after, so you're kind of probably became very close to your mom. What was your feeling when you got to the States? Like, do you remember anything?
I do. So at this time I was already in second grade in Romania. Because because my dad was in America, because we're getting packages, people were either jealous or quietly resentful or maybe directly resentful. So some of the things I remember, I was pretty smart from the get-go. I mean, smart enough to where I was like number one in the class. But I remember my teacher, who was our friend, told us she can't give me the number one premio. I can't be the number one because my dad's gone. Like, obviously, that would not fly in the communist Romania. So I remember, I mean, it's not like I was marginalized, but I was definitely not promoted where I needed to be. I was kept under the boot, and she came to our house to apologize that she can't do much more officially.
That's very
That's what it
noble.
is.
That's very noble
Yeah.
of her.
Yeah, I went back and I visited her when before she passed away when I was an adult, and I thanked her for everything. But she was very noble to tell us. Otherwise, it would have been a frustration to no end. So as a kid, you want to see justice done. If you're number one, you should get the prize, but not really, not if other forces are at play, right? So, anyways, among that, I was trying to get ready, trying to understand or speak with the kids English. We had no idea. Nobody had any English skills. So I was like going to a foreign land of unknowns. I was not anymore wanted in the land which I enjoyed. I enjoyed my youth a lot, my childhood. I mean, everybody was there. My cousins, my parents, my grandparents. The church was great. The street was great. The school was great. So I'm leading something pretty good, pretty solid, pretty firm for an unknown, right? And the unknown, when we took that tube called an airplane, right? I've never been to Bucharest. Got on a plane, got on Tarom. It was a good experience. It was a fun experience. Imagine if like first time as a kid to ride a 747. It was those massive, massive airplanes. I think it was Tarom. Let me rephrase that. We rode I don't remember the exact plane, but it was a very big plane for me. So I don't think it was Tarom. I think it was a Pan Am. I don't remember the plane. I got to ask, but it was a big plane. To make a long story short, the trip was whatever it happened. But when we got to Portland, that really shocked me was how many people waited for us, and they're all strangers to us. Now, my dad befriended them in about a year that he was there. It was the whole church, but by the whole church, I mean 300-400 people, and by 300-400 people, I mean they're loud. At this time, you could go up to the gate. They had instruments. I remember brass instruments. I remember joy. I remember singing. And we're like heroes. Now, when we left Romania, we left, obviously, everybody cried and everybody hugged and everybody, especially the grandparents, will never see you again, that kind of the remorse. So we left tears behind
Yeah,
on an airplane and we're headed to an unknown. And nobody told us, nobody prepared us of what's going to happen. It was the best surprise ever. And so popping out of that airplane, besides the music and the brass and the this and the that, it was just my dad, like the simple man that we knew that did it all for us later on the line, and he was waiting for us. So it's kind of interesting just to run and hug him. And the emotions. Obviously, I was a young kid, but the emotions overwhelmed us, and it was a lot of people, and everybody wanted to say something. And then we had a great meal, obviously. And great bananas. I still remember the smell of bananas 'cause I don't think I've ever eaten bananas that good until since then, or until then. And it was just food and joy and fellowship, and the table was set, and it was long into the night. And then reading the like I said, the roses and the flowers everywhere. It was just like the best homecoming, but
yeah.
we came to a home that we didn't know. We didn't prepare. It was done for us. So we kind of hit the ground running, and the church just embraced us as they did every family back then, as refugees, as people that left the dark and cold system for a new reality.
Now, George, so again, this is very metaphoric, right? You made
Sure.
it very nicely pack or clear that when you love people are crying and almost metaphorically with like somebody passing away. But then when you
Yeah.
got to on this other side, there was like a huge welcoming party, right? That's interesting. You
Yeah.
brought that up. I just think that's interesting, right? Because we hear that metaphor a lot, So, but this actually you kind of experience that uh, d- the dichotomy or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It is a
Yeah,
dichotomy. Yeah, very diverging paths, right? So one would be obviously our heart broke when we left everybody that we loved dear behind. There's only one
yeah,
person we're gonna go see in the new life. It's our dad. So obviously that's the reunification of the family. But we left everybody else that's sweet and dear behind, and we didn't
yeah,
know if we are gonna see them again because Romania was a closed country. So literally, if they would have been communist for 30 more years, we didn't know. Maybe we wouldn't see him for 30 years. And that time, maybe the grandparents would have passed away and the cousins and so on. But so it was very much an unknown when we left behind. We knew what we had, but it was unknown if we've ever,
yeah.
we'll ever see them again.
Another thing I do want to clarify for the audience, I feel like lately there's been like this romanticizing of the Communist Party or socialism, and just to clarify for them, you guys, your dad didn't like risk his life to run away because Romania was hunky dory, right? Maybe if you can describe what things were like back then, and why did you have to? Why did the teacher have to come and explain to you that you couldn't be awarded
Yeah.
the sort of the first prize? Which, by the way, I
Yeah.
didn't know you were
I was
top of your class essentially.
I
So yeah,
was, yeah. So I think, as humans, we all yearn for these immovable things like justice, freedom, the ability to just choose your own path, right? The ability to do your own thing. And my dad was definitely aware that that was not allowed, and there's forces at work, like I said earlier, that were dark and sinister and many times unfair. We like fairness as humans, right? And things were unfair. Things were done backwards in many ways. Things were done with aiding, with lies and with bribes, and everything had to be touched or allowed or perceived by someone else first. You couldn't just have initial ideas. You couldn't be creative, or you couldn't be your own person, right? So you're very much limited as a human being under communist anything, but in communist Romania, from how I remember it and how I studied it. So my dad wanted to have his own business, and he did, but it came at a very great cost, right? And even in the Communist Party, when they would ask him, he literally told them, "You're teaching us how to lie. You're teaching us how to steal, because if we don't, we're not going to make it." So it was a system based on lies to begin with, which was perpetuated by lies, right? Everybody pretended it was nice. Everybody pretended it was good. Everybody had to have that fake. It's ironic that Romanians say that we in the West now have that fake smile. All Romania was fake. It wasn't just a smile. It was your walk, your purchasing, you're pretending to enjoy life. That was all
yeah,
fake because nobody enjoyed it. It was behind the scenes. Everybody complained, but out in the open, everything was fake. So I don't know if this fake smile, quote unquote, gets to me. I don't believe it, because we lived a fake reality. Everything was fake. The streets were clean only when the
yeah,
when it was necessary, and the food was only put in on the shelves whenever the party members would come, and everything was fake. Everything was a pretense. And in that reality, my dad couldn't live that fake lifestyle. He was either going to be, the whole adage of "give me liberty or give me death." He literally believed that. Now he didn't know that quote. It was said well before him in America, but he had that same spirit. Like, I'd rather be free, even if it costs my life getting it, than to pretend constantly that this lie is reality. It's not. It was all fake. So, anyways, he fought really hard for many years. He had unsuccessful attempts, but this attempt was successful, and his whole thing was, I want my children to be free, and I want them to be able to create, right? Because you can't be creative if you're limited by sinister forces or people that are going to take your creation and call it their own and so on, right? So the limits that he saw on us or in our lives, he wanted to get rid of those limits. So basically, as people sometimes say, "Oh, she or he or whatever broke the glass ceiling." Romania had a very low glass ceiling. Everybody was supposed to be content with little, content knowing little, and content complaining very little, or not at all, actually. So the ceiling was very low, and you cannot rise above those limitations that were external and that they're also fake. And
Yeah.
you were basically gonna live the rest of your life, given the freedoms that somebody thought you should have or shouldn't have, right? And my dad couldn't stand that. So he broke the ceiling, as it were. He gave us freedom to breathe and to create and to think and just to be our own individual selves, whatever that means, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now, from
that's
a
it.
materialistic standpoint, though, I experienced this as well because I'm from there. I mean, as you said, a lot of things were very fake, right? You go into the store, they would only fill up the stores to buy stuff. This is not for free or anything. To buy stuff, we're only filled up
Yeah,
when there is a by party member, which you mentioned, we mean party members of the Communist Party. So
absolutely.
they
Yeah,
would try to kind of facade this thing that the streets are clean, that the stores have everything you want, only only to kind of as a facade when these guys would come around to check on their citizens. But
yeah.
why did the teacher have to come and kind of excuse herself for not being able to award you the sort of you know the the
Yeah.
top spot?
So she was not obviously a Christian because Christians weren't teachers at the time. But I think she had the sense of justice and the sense of what's right and wrong. And she realized it's wrong that you can't reward the person that merits, right? It's not based on merit, it's based on some external forces, and whoever the party decides is going to be the one that's going to be promoted, right? So it was
So
fake. That was fake too.
yeah, I wanted you to mention that. So you're saying that basically either as a Christian or because your dad sort of defied the Christian and left,
Yep.
left the system, she could not officially promote somebody that sort of defied the system. Is that you were basically
Yes.
persecuted?
Yeah, and I would say it's more basic than that. She couldn't promote who deserved it, whether it's me or somebody else. So it's kind of like you know who won, but because there's strings behind being pulled, right? You have another winner. You declare him a winner. Everybody cheers for the wrong person. It's like everybody
Mm,
knows it's fake, right? That's actually going on a lot right now in our current society. I don't want to get into it, but it's not who deserves it. It's not the merit, but it's whoever gets anointed or pushed forward or allowed to, right? So it's a very tricky. It's a system based on lies, basically. It's a system based on other forces. And what's interesting, as you were saying, when we would get food, when whenever they decided, but once in a while, just to keep us quiet, they would bring milk or whatever. So, but remember, you had to stay in line, right?
yeah, yeah.
And my mom would let me go because I became very ingenuitive in how to get milk, right? Or how to get whatever I was getting, sugar or whatever. And I don't know where I picked it up, but we pick up bad habits pretty fast. I picked up lying. So I was a little kid, but I remember the people were all standing in line. They all were, it was in the morning, it was cold, it was whatever. They all had a family to feed, but I learned that if I call my mom, mama, 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 and they're like, Las makupilo, leave the child to find his mom, and they would propel me forward. And if you say it enough, they'll propel you to the front of the line. At the front of the
Right.
line, there's no mom because mom sent you to get the whatever, the sugar. And I knew how to like quiet down somewhere along the way so that I just get propelled and nobody understands why, but I'm just being shot forward. So I learned how to cheat, right? I learned how to lie, how to deceive others. I deceived adults as a kid because that was the only way to get the sugar because not everybody was going to get it that day. And I knew it.
Yeah, yeah,
They knew it. Everybody knew it. But anyways,
yeah.
they're honest. They're honest, and I wasn't as a kid. So you can see how evil the system is, where it teaches you how to live a lie or to propel a lie just to get ahead a little bit, or to get the basics. Yeah,
So basically, it
unfortunately.
was rationed, is what you're saying. It was
Absolutely. Yeah.
rationed the whatever you're waiting in line for. Which, by the way, George, just so the audience understands, the line was not like a Starbucks line where it's
Oh,
just
no, no.
sort of out the door waiting for their coffee. We're talking about
It could be,
hours.
yeah. It could be 5 in the morning to 8 when they open. It could be 2, 3 hours, and people were tired, and it was cold, and it doesn't matter what season, rain or shine. And people were waiting, and it was one of those things where I couldn't wait. Obviously, not only was the food rationed, but there wasn't enough for everybody that had the right to get that food. So it was not just ration; it was first come, first serve, right?
Yep.
So a little bit of
Yeah.
capitalistic spin to it, but first come, first serve. Everybody wanted to be first because everybody had needs, right? And anyways, we did okay given the situation. God's always taking care of everyone, and people made it, but it was just ugly how you could make it. You had to cheat, scam, and you became something else to make it. And
Well,
everybody was doing that. Yeah.
I wanted to emphasize that because again, I feel like socialism is raising its ugly head even in the U.S. and is being romanticized. And it was not it was terrible. Like it was evil what was going on in Romania. From every aspect, like you mentioned, from control, from being able to have an opportunity to get by. You were persecuted if you're a Christian or if you didn't sort of talk the language of the party. But these lines, just economically, these lines, you had to wait in line to buy basic needs. And then we're not talking, right, George? We're talking very basic. We're talking bread.
Bread, sugar, milk,
Yeah,
oil. Those are the
and then when
basics.
there was meat, meat would be crazy lines. I remember they would go in line at like 4 a.m., 3 a.m. in the morning. They would wake us up as kids because we would go, and if we were also online, you would get
More.
more pounds or
Yeah.
kilograms, whatever it was.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we would sit in line with them, just
Yeah.
to get meat. And many times you get to the front of the line and they say, "Hey, it's done. We don't have any more." So then you sat for nothing. So anyway, I just wanted to kind of emphasize that your dad left not because I don't know he. I'm assuming not because things were good. He left because they were terrible. But anyway,
Ironically, he was a business owner. He had about 30 people that worked for him, so he had plenty of money. But he didn't like it that he had the money and he had to bribe, right? You probably remember, if you had your own cow, you couldn't slaughter the calf. You would go to prison for that.
yeah, yeah,
And so on and so forth. But so he could afford certain things, but he wasn't allowed to do certain things. And to him that was so limiting. Even if you had money, even if you had influence, even if you're a business owner, you were still considered under the boot of whoever was in charge from the Communist Party. And that person, at the drop of a hat or at the whim, could make rules on the spot. So it wasn't you weren't guaranteed any freedoms. You weren't guaranteed any outcomes. You were guaranteed that the Communist Party, they could make decisions for you that could be irreversible or irrevocable, even. And they could do that at the whim. Whoever was in charge of that area or that region could make decisions that would affect your family or you at any point. So it was a very chaotic. I was not chaotic, very, yeah, maybe chaotic, unpredictable. And
uncenter,
yeah,
uncertain. Yeah,
uncertain, yeah. And as we know, the whole world, the whole universe is predictable, laws of nature and so on. But that was not predictable, and that's chaos. That's the antithesis to that, to to order and to the way the universe and everything else works in our life. And that was the whole point. They would keep you on your toes. You would always fear, and fear is a great motivator. And it's also a great control, right? They would keep you on your toes to fear because you don't know what would happen next, and
yeah,
you're just happy that the sword wouldn't cut your head off. That was basically as a kid, that's what I felt. You're happy to be left alone. You're joyful that you weren't being harassed or unduly messed with. You almost expected the worst, but when it didn't happen, you're like, oh great, it was a normal day. How
yeah,
exciting.
yeah,
you know Very interesting way of looking at life.
yeah. And there were a
Yeah,
lot of people.
uh,
Sorry, I was just gonna say there were a lot of people that uh, probably got abducted, or especially Christians. They went to jail for many years just because they were preaching the gospel and they wouldn't stop. So, and my dad was telling me the story, and I even filmed them on another podcast, saying that it would happen in the middle of the night, or just randomly they walk in your house and you're gone. So very unpredictable.
very unpredictable, yeah. And you couldn't plan much for long term because they wouldn't allow you for that, right? So you couldn't have a plan. You were basically at the whim of the moment. So, for example, you couldn't plan to buy a second car because you weren't given the permission. You
Yeah,
wouldn't plan a long trip because you're not sure if you're going to get the approval to leave your city. You couldn't plan a baptism of your kid because, well, maybe you're not on this year's list. You don't decide when you baptize your kid; the party does. You couldn't plan, to open up to dream of something. You dream of what? Like, mind your own business and stop dreaming. They would mock dreamers and mock people that wanted more than the bleak, dark, gray reality.
Yeah.
Who are you? Who do you think you are to dream? Like, who give you that right to dream? Who gave
Yeah.
you the right to be something else? Like, did you get permission for that? Everything was permissive, or excuse me, was in the order of permissions, had to be granted, had to be allowed, which is kind of
Yeah.
an interesting way to look at it. That, again, antithesis to freedom and the ability to choose.
And you may be thinking, well, how would they know that? Well, because unfortunately, there were some informants that even infiltrated the church, and they were kind of paid to do that. And you never knew. You couldn't. It was hard to trust people because you could be talking to an informant that eventually may tell the party what you're planning to do. So it was a lot of that going on, right?
Yeah, Elvis Presley has a song about suspicious minds, and that reminded me of Romania. Everybody's mind was a suspicious mind because you had no idea who's going to turn you in or if anybody is listening or waiting for their
Yeah.
turn. I remember cracking jokes with the kids in the street, and some of them, were political, and we would make fun a little bit of the system. And I remember we would censor each other. These are kids, 7, 8, 6 years old. We didn't know if one of the kids is gonna go tell the parent, and it's gonna unleash some sort of nonsense. So even the jokes were limited. We couldn't laugh as kids at the things we wanted to laugh at because, well, you weren't allowed, right? So that suspicious mind crept all the way down to the kids. If your
Yeah.
ability to think was there, you would think that you have to be careful because somebody may be watching or somebody may be guarding, and if you step out of line, man, I never did. I never got the consequences, but everybody feared the consequences so much so that it never really happened. So fear
Yeah.
was a great, yeah,
Absolutely, I agree.
great
And I
tool.
remember being told sometimes by my parents, "Hey, make sure you don't tell the kids this or that, or don't talk to them." We used to have these books that were Christian songbooks and are hidden somewhere in our house. So because they were being transferred to different locations through the country, and I remember that was something we couldn't talk about, or we weren't really even supposed to know, or that people would come over to pray and have a Bible study. That was not allowed.
That's
So
right.
we had to be careful. Like we'd be told, hey, you can't just openly talk about that with your friends, because there were a lot of them
Yeah.
were non-Christians, and we didn't know who you were talking to. But anyway,
Yeah.
very hey, just to paint a picture for you guys, in case you're wondering what communism is like, you can listen to this podcast, and George just could tell you more. But George, so
Uh-huh.
I wanted to kind of open this up a little bit because this kind of gives us a little bit of insight into kind of how you grew up and what kind of formed you. So you got to the States. I didn't realize you came to Portland. But okay, so that's kind of where you started your journey. At this point, did you, I guess, did you know Christ? I mean, were you sort of, what was your spiritual walk like? Or
Yeah. So, obviously in Romania, I had my share of things that kids do, and I was both in the village and in the city. And I would say I was exposed to a lot of nonsense. I was very mature for my age. And somebody said that if your kid's mature enough to sin, he's mature enough to repent. But I didn't have any repentance with anyone, talk with anyone. But my grandfather was a pastor. My dad was, leading in the church at the time. My great grandfather, I had a whole history of church experience, and it was wonderful. So I could say I was in the church, but I was not. I didn't have a repentance experience. But I was definitely sinning and learning a bunch of nonsense on the side from the children. And growing up in that, I came to America, and when I came to America, all that was taken away from me, and all of a sudden, I was now thrust into a new culture. So I was busy with that for a few years, and that was the tumultuous few years that happened after that. But in that context, thank God, I was saved from perhaps things that children shouldn't do at 7, 8 years old. Like trying cigarettes and trying witchcraft and doing nonsense that I'm shocked that I've been through it. I was exposed to it, but I'm also grateful that I was because I know how ugly it could be and how bad some of those people turned out after I left. But because they were so limited in the streets, because we had almost not anything to do, as a young kid in Romania in the 80s, we were drawn to these mystique and these forbidden things and the forbidden fruit, right? Um, cigarettes were expensive, were not to be found. So when you found some or got some, man, that was a wild treat. Not only did it once or twice, but it was enough to kind of give me that sense of it's forbidden and it feels good to. The cigarette sucked, but the experience felt good to be hiding from the authorities or hiding from the parents or hiding from So the devil was definitely after my tail. And
Hmm.
to whatever degree that he succeeded, when I came to America, it was kind of cool that God snuffed that out and it was a fresh start.
So,
So yeah.
so how did you sort of come to know Christ, I guess, on a more
Sure.
intimate level?
Um, I'll tell you this. It just few minutes to lead you there. When I arrived in America, I arrived in a city called Gresham. Now, Gresham is not so great now in Oregon, but at the time it was a brand new city. They had a lot of funds. It was 1983, and it was America under Ronald Reagan, right? It was the booming, the expanding, the creating, the trying new things. And the economy was awful, but it was growing. And with that growing economy, they had a brand new school. And in that brand new school, again, imagine coming from Romania where you had a blackboard and some chalk and some desks. That's all you had. And of course, the picture of dear leader that you would salute every day that was 25 years old because he wanted to look young. Anyways, we saluted the young guy, but he was old. And I came to America and there was total freedom. The school was actually an open concept. This was weird back in 83. Like the classrooms didn't have walls, they had glass partitions. So I was in a third, fourth combo so we could interact. The library, you could walk to the library. The whole thing was indoors. It was beautiful, carpeted. Um, they would take us to, for example, swimming lessons, right? They would take us
Hmm.
to see the astronomy center. They had whatever astronomy lessons. They would teach us American folk songs. Like I learned all the folk songs back then. They would take us to choir to teach us music. Such an enriching experience. They brought a computer into the class in 1983. They brought a computer with a floppy disk and they taught us what a computer is and what it's going to do for the world. And I was like, man, this is great. So I was thrust for about a year and one of the greatest. Now, mind you, they had no ESL. I didn't speak anything. So everything was just visual and whatever I could, put the dots together. But they literally would bust us out. We also had gymnastics equipment. We had a gym that was the most beautiful wood floor and we had a play. And so that's kind of like the America that I grew up in, at least the first year. It was great. And we had to leave Oregon, and that was my experience. It was just the best experience at school. Free food, right? Even though I didn't have English skills, I could barter and talk to people with signs and whatever. I made do. But then we came to California. California to me at the time was like a descent into hell, literal hell. It was the middle of summer. It was over 100 degrees on the way down. We rented a U-Haul with no AC, and it was a 55-mile-per-hour limiter on the U-Haul. Imagine leaving everything after a year that I just experienced. Of course, the church and the friends that I made, and whatever, the bicycles and the food that I experienced. It was great. And now I'm in a U-Haul going I don't know where with my parents, and I don't know why. They didn't explain, and it was stupid hot. The windows were down, hot air was blasting. This is the 5 freeway in the Central California Valley. It's like literally hell in the middle of the day. And I remember looking out the window and feeling this hot air blasting me, and I'm thinking, why are we going to hell? What did we do wrong? So we ended up in California. It was great, Southern California. I had headaches from the heat for days, weeks, months after I got here. The whole summer was wretched. But as all kids, I adapted quickly. And what was interesting, the reason I brought all that up is now the schools were shanties. They're basically like each room separated from another room. They're basically like portables. And you walk outside, we didn't have grass. If I say the town, it wouldn't be appropriate, I guess. But anyways, it was the first town. I was the only white guy and everybody was Mexican. Everybody was Mexican. I was one white kid. Luckily, I had one other person that was white on campus. She happened to be my teacher, Mrs. Amaral.
Hmm.
She made education great. She taught me how to spell, how to read. Actually, she read the Chronicles of Narnia to us in fifth grade, fourth grade, and I was like blown away. Like what she was bringing, she was opening my mind, right? But outside, we had just trees, no grass, and dirt, and it was hot as heck. And we were playing marbles, and that was the extent of my now American dream, right? But it was great because that town is just a few miles down the road now, and we lived there for a year plus. But even those years were beautiful. And then we went to the next school, to the place where the church is, the town of Redlands. That was sixth grade, and that's when I started. Again, I was not a dumb kid, so I was like number one in math. I was pretty very good. I remember facts I could recite, and I was one of the, if not the best kid in that class. And it was a great class. The teacher was Mrs. Amaral, the fifth grade teacher, was excellent for her wisdom. This dude was an old retired Marine that looked like my grandfather, but really solid, all muscle. And he was a man's man, and he just shaped us, and that was the best experience I could have. I had boot camp in sixth grade. And the reason I bring all that up is I was at the top of the world. I was strong. I would do pull ups. I would lift rocks. In 6th grade, you show off to the girls because you start noticing they exist. We wrestled. I wasn't the strongest kid, but I was definitely one of the fastest and the wisest, and whatever. And I go to 7th grade and 8th grade, and this is junior high. And remember how I told you I was a minority, and 7th grade, I'm still a minority, but now I'm a minority, but I'm at the bottom of the totem pole. From like peak performance in 6th grade, I got selected to represent our school as ASB leader, and I'm now the bottom of the totem pole. I'm shy. I'm being picked on. I'm skinny. I started getting pimples, and God had His way with me because during those next 2 years, He pushed on me really hard, and the kids pushed on me really hard, and we were marginalized as Romanians. We had like 8 or 10 Romanians, and we would be laughed at and mocked. And I remember at lunch they would throw milks at us because we all clustered together. We kind of had a defense mechanism. But we're talking hundreds of kids. You're not going to pick fights. So we clustered, and because we clustered, we became anomalies. We were those white people that were anomalies to begin with, but they also spoke the strange language. And I never spoke Romanian. My friends always insisted talking Romanian. I'm like, dude, we have to integrate. We speak Romanian, we're going to be forever outcasts. So I never spoke Romanian, but they did. But that brought the wrath. But they were my friends. I couldn't deny them. So it was 2 years of bad experience in 7th and 8th grade, to the point of I got humbled. Only God knows how much He humbled me. And during this time, ironically, I would come home and I was like, I don't want to live like this anymore. It was just pathetic. Remember 8th grade, I was just broken. People were mocking me at PE. They were kind of like picking on me. It was kind of fun to pick on me because I was shy. I would turn red. I would like back away. I didn't want to fight back. I was just like, leave me alone. I want to live my life. But I became the butt of their jokes. And anyways, and I realize now that God took me through all that so that when I teach, I can identify with these people. So anyways, in 8th grade, I literally, we're at the apartments, we're renting apartments, and I found a dog, and it was a reddish dog, a stray but beautiful, mature female dog, most beautiful dog, and I named her Sheba. And
Hmm.
this is where salvation comes into play through a dog. So
Hmm.
Sheba was my best friend. Now nobody would listen to me anymore, right? Remember the fear I have of not people not listening. At school, nobody listened to me. I dropped out of ASB. I was doing my work just to get by. And I would come home and nobody asked me what was going on. I was like a teenager that was confused and lost, hormones, whatever. Nothing was working. At the apartments, there was a bunch of thugs. It was kind of like a low income apartments. And Shiva was like this little bright light in my world. So I would pet her, and literally I started talking to the dog, and she was my friend. And I would come home and just have a little bit of relief. I don't know. I kind of laugh at people that need a therapy dog, but at the time, she was my therapy dog before I even knew that existed, right? But it wasn't a therapy dog as much as it was God's little enticement to get to know Him. So I wanted to keep her because she was a stray, and I told my parents I want her. The manager was my friend, our friend, because her kid was my best friend, and we asked her if we can keep a dog, which there's no bending the rules, and the rules were yes, but you got to have a $50 deposit. Now this is 1987, 1988. $50 was a lot of money. I mean, rent was like 200 or something. So that was a lot of money. I don't know if my dad had the money. And first of all, they didn't want a dog. Why would they want a dog? And it's an apartment. You can't keep it inside the house. Outside, they're gonna steal her. So what's the point? So I prayed for the first time, like it was a bargain between me and God. I knew God. I went to church. I was very dedicated, but I never had a moment of just talking to God and saying, okay, Lord, now this is the time I want to see if you care, right? Because nobody cares. My dog cares, and you know that, but do you really care about me, right? So I asked God, I said, look, Lord, please, I need this dog. I need her. And I had a bargain with them. I'll read 10 chapters a day, right, from the Bible. Uh, Great exchange. Let me keep her. Done deal. I went to the parents. They pulled out the money, the manager. Everything was great. The dog was there. Everybody was perfect. And it was great for about a few, I would say, weeks until I got into Numbers and Leviticus, and oh my gosh, who reads 10 chapters of that a day in 8th grade? So I kind of eased off, or I would say I broke my promise. And what would you know? Because God's always He speaks our language and He speaks to our needs. Sheba got stolen. The fear that I had eventually happened. So like, oh my God, the dog is gone. And I knew I did it wrong, and I wasn't going to go to God and apologize, but I had to, because I was like, Lord, I blew it. I'm going to start reading again. But now here's the deal. As soon as I started reading again, the kids found her, and it was down the street at some, original gangster's house, if I could leave it like that. It was an old gangster. And we walked by there. They found Sheba. Now my thought is maybe that was his dog to begin with, because I found her full grown. So I was like, I saw the dog. I went back and I had another talk with God. I'm like, Lord, I asked once and you delivered. I'm going to ask again. This is even more impossible, because that may be his dog. I'm going to ask him, she had a dog house. a beautiful yard with grass. You could tell the old Mexican guy was just happy with his dog because I could see him through his chain link fence. I talked with God again. I restarted my 10 chapters a day, and I took life, the bull by the horns, and I said, I'm going to go ask the guy. And I just walked to his fence and I go, sir, that's my dog. Can I please have it back? Now, this is a scrawny little kid, entertaining a gangster, right? He looked at me. He says, of course. He gave me the dog. He gave me the doghouse and he gave me food. I didn't know dogs, you can buy food in a bag, but I got it all. And I was like, man, if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is, Literally, I had a doghouse for the dog as well. And that dog lived with us for many years until she passed away. But that was my interaction two different times with God when I realized he will keep his end of the bargain if I will. And to me, it sounds like a very transactional interaction with God, but that's how it started. And at that point, I realized, Lord, you love me and you care for me, even if nobody cares for me at the junior high. Obviously, ninth grade came and God, raised me out of that valley. I became an athlete. I started lifting weights. It was just beautiful. And it became a different thing. But those 2 years were the worst years of my life. When you're 13, 14 and developing and, you know, and God puts his finger on you, it's not fun at any age, much less when you're a teenager and you have to deal with everything else, especially in a school it was violent. The 80s were really violent and really rude. This whole bullying stuff. Man, we were getting bullied left and right. That was like how you lived. You breed bullying. And if you couldn't bully, you would just get bullied because everybody was a bully. The 80s were rough.
Yeah. I don't know how come we never told me the story with Sheba.
Oh,
I
I'm
just
sorry. I
knew
thought I
Sheba
did.
with no, I never heard it, so I'm glad you told it
Yeah.
here. But I remember that Sheba was like a name of like a cat food or something. It was a
Yeah, it
commercial.
was. Yeah, yeah. Later on, I saw that. And then, yeah, but we just named her She Was. She was a great dog.
So interesting, so that was your interaction with the gangster, huh?
Yeah.
You basically no, that's cool. So George, okay, so that's kind of you're saying basically this was your sort of segue into having a relationship with God by testing
Yeah.
and
And then, of course, at school, when we were marginalized and pushed on, I realized that if I sell my school lunch, I would get $1.25. I was gonna make some money. So every day I would sell my school lunch. And then right about this time, so it starts transactional, starts as a child would, but somewhere along the lines, I realized I like to fast. And it wasn't just that I was selling my lunch because I could have brought food from home or people would give me food. I was making the money, but I also realized, no, I really want to fast because fasting got me closer to God. And I started to talk to God and I started to like experience him. And to me, fasting was a natural thing. And then I realized I can sell my lunch instead of throwing it away. So I think it was fasting first, lunch, doesn't matter the order, but the idea was they worked hand in hand. And I was making some money, and I didn't care because I was fasting. I was really enjoying my time. And when they were throwing milks at us and yelling and jeering us, it didn't really bother me anymore because I was kind of like in a different state of mind. I was like, it's normal. They're going to do that to you, especially if you're a Christian. So I kind of took it more of it's a test of my faith versus they're picking on Romanians. And about this time is I realized I want to get baptized. I want to give my life to the Lord. It's like, what's the point of I was 13 or 14 at the time. What's the point of delaying? Like, I'm ready. I'm like, I'm into this. I love this. I love him. And I was going to church constantly, but this was when I realized that I can be useful and I could play piano. I can do some things. I was useful to the church, not just to myself, as a person. I wasn't just taking stuff. I can give back.
okay. From starting from this sort of experience of getting to know God, how did you get to the point where you're I don't know, became passionate about serving him or getting involved in like ministry? How did
Yeah.
you,
Um,
is there a story there or just sort of a
There
gradual?
is. There's quite a story there. So our church at the time was going through some tumultuous times, like all fresh immigrant churches are, and there ended up being a split. And my family, including my parents, went with the split. I refused to do that. I stayed behind with the original church, and I was playing piano. I realized that's where I belong, and I should continue to play. It's kind of awkward because they would drop me off at church here, and they would continue to the other church. So I was split from them for
Hmm.
a while, and they allow. What's interesting to me is they allowed that. I don't know why, but they did. They wanted me to choose my own way. So I stayed behind until the original church. Even after these guys split, they fought. They had some internal fighting, and it turned ugly once. And I was like, man, this is like I don't want to live here. It's very toxic. So I went to that church where my parents and my uncle and everybody else was. Now there, my uncle was the pastor. There, that was a new church. It was a bunch of young people, and I wasn't into kids or young people. I was kind of into myself at this time. I was like 16, I think, and I was into myself. I was just like trying to figure things out. I had a car, whatever. I had friends, and so I went to that church, and they had a brass. They had a not a brass, but it was like um, fanfare. It was fanfare, but it was also it was like an orchestra slash fanfare. It was a mix. A lot of young people. I'm talking about 30-ish, and they would
Mm-hmm.
meet often. And I just never joined that. I was doing my own thing. I was, kamagaro entre oi, I feel like I was a little taller, older, and I had my own thing to do. And doing that at one point I really enjoyed the boring Tuesday night prayers. And there was this guy, his name was Krachun. He looked like a caveman. I won't say his last name, but he looked very basic, very simple man, never wanted attention, the most godly guy, but never, stood out in anything. And he had a prophecy for me. And I was at the piano. I remember he said, "You're going to be a leader." And I was like, "Yeah, right." I was shy to begin with, and I just didn't care to lead people because I didn't want to be in front of anyone. I was playing piano, but I didn't care to be, leading anything. And he says, "You're going to be a leader." And I saw two stripes on your shoulders. So you're going to have different responsibilities. And I said, "Okay, fine." And as I always do, I've listened to prophecies and words of knowledge and all that. I said, "Well, let's see. We'll see how it turns out." I was 16, 17. Time passed. One of the girls in our church, ironically, she got married in Detroit, and she's still in Detroit. I can tell you later the name, but there's the whole family's in Detroit. So she got married, was getting married, I should say. Her name's Aurika. She goes, "George, I want you at my wedding." Now, this is when you could buy tickets and give tickets away. So I bought a ticket, $350. It was the most expensive thing I ever purchased in my life. And I was looking forward to going to Detroit to her wedding. At the same time, this was 1995, I believe. So I was 20 at the time, 2021. There was the first youth conference on the West Coast, and it happened to be the same weekend. So when things overlap, you have to choose one or the other, right? And I was confused. I was perplexed. I was like, "Lord, I bought the ticket to see the wedding, but I want to go to the youth conference." Something drew me to that youth conference. I was like at the age when I wanted to see girls and music and just to know more than my little church. I was kind of tired of the little church thing. And so I asked my uncle, who was a pastor. I go, "Uncle John, what would you recommend I do?" He goes, "Simple. Give your ticket away and go to the youth conference." He goes, "You have to go meet the people that God's going to use in your generation, and they have to meet you because God's going to use you in this generation." So he made it a mutual exchange. He gave me a challenge: go meet people and let people meet you because you matter and they matter. So I gave my ticket away to a lady for free. And I was like, "What a klutz." I got in the car, got a bunch of young kids in the car, and I drove them all the way to Sacramento. Now, I knew not one soul there. And at this conference, it was about 400 people, great musicians, like some of the best. We're still friends. As the service was over, I had that ringing in my ear. I got to meet the people and they got to meet me. So, how are you going to meet people? You walk up and introduce yourself, right? Cold turkey. "Hey, I'm George. What's your name?" "My name's David." "Great, man. Good playing the guitar." "Hey, what's your name?" "I'm also George." "Man, your piano skills are amazing. What's your name?" "I'm Claudia." "What's your name?" I'm so on and so forth. And I met a ton of people. Literally, they didn't know I exist. I came from a little church in some, godforsaken town in Southern California. This is Sacramento, the capital. Big churches, right? Big event, lots of music, explosion of talent. And I just went to meet people, and I loved it because I met them all. If they stood out in any which way, I congratulated them, and I made it a point to tell them I like how they played or who they are, what they did.
Yeah.
And I'm George, and I haven't really stopped doing that since then. Meeting nice people and letting nice people meet me.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. People that matter and make life count.
You're saying that the initial sort of scenario was you stayed faithful at the church that your family sort of left from just to play the piano. And I think that's remarkable, by the way, because probably 9 out of 10 somebody would not do that, and then probably even your parents would have been like, "No, you're coming with us. I don't care."
Yeah, they
So,
let
so
me
I think,
choose.
yeah, that's interesting. I think that's very interesting. But anyway, I think that's a sign of things to come, I would say, because you kind of remain faithful on that. So you're saying this brother had this sort of word of wisdom
Yeah,
over your life, um, with two stripes, you're saying, which
yeah.
I think is interesting. I'm curious if you ever figured out what those stripes were alluded to.
I I'm thinking, both music, that's where our ministry went, and also teaching, I guess. I don't know. That's what I figured. Just keep it basic, but it's in the music because I'm not a excellent musician. I'm not an excellent preacher or orator. I'm a little bit of both. So I got both skills. I can talk or I can sing. And because of those skills, I got to meet you and everybody else. that I cherish.
Yeah, indeed, and we'll get to that in a second. But George, so how did you learn to play the piano? How did you get to that point?
Um, I learned in Romania, and we had the teacher was rough. We would get beat, we would get harassed, our ears would get pulled, our hair. She was just rough, and it was a good start, but it was not love at all, you know. So then when I got here in my tumultuous seventh and eighth grade that I just explained, my parents decided to uh, pay for piano lessons for us. And if I tell you that they paid $30 an hour back in the 80s, it's just unheard of.
That
And that's what they
is,
paid. Yeah,
yeah.
they would pay, and we would do half-hour sessions at a time. And it was basically the Seventh Day Adventist. One of the ladies taught us, and we're still friends to this day. But she taught us piano, and I was apropos with faithfulness. I remember looking at the piano. All pianos that are clean are, the uprights are very shiny, especially the darker ones, and you can see your reflection somewhat. And I remember thinking during my eighth and ninth grade years when my friends were doing wild stuff, I started to be an athlete, I started to be known, and I was still doing piano lessons because I'd started since seventh grade, right? And I saw my reflection once and I'm thinking, man, what a nerd. Like I'm doing piano lessons with this old lady with glasses, you know? And my friends are out there doing who knows what, you know? So the devil was tugging at my mind, but I remember like fighting it, saying, "Yeah, but this matters more. This actually has long-term benefits. I don't know what they are, but they're not for now. Piano's not for now." And I stopped in ninth grade because of the tug of war. I just couldn't do it anymore. So I stopped, and I didn't want to play for a few years, and I didn't. But then about the time when the church split, I was the main piano player. Now there's somebody much better than me, but she would show up kind of seldom. It was a pastor's daughter. She's an excellent piano player, but she would let me play because I was faithful. I was there on Tuesday nights. I was there on Thursday nights, you know. I was there on Sunday mornings. I was there all the time. And even though I wasn't good or as good, I was faithful. And I would lead the songs or help the songs. And she would have the freedom not to be always, there, if that makes sense. So I think she liked me being in that position. And I was like, I didn't mind. I realized that faithfulness is more than talent, or
Hmm,
sometimes trumps talent.
that's interesting. Yeah, that's another great lesson here. So,
Yeah.
when you said we, as far as learning, who else? Your brothers, your sister?
Yeah, all my siblings took piano lessons. At the time,
Wow,
it was me and my brother. Yeah,
that's a big commitment on your parents' side. I mean,
yeah.
that's very cool. Okay, so that's how you got going in music. Were you also singing, or was it just piano?
Yeah, I was singing a little bit. In my early 20s, I mean, singing is beautiful, but we didn't have anybody. When we reunited the churches a few years after that, we actually, one of the reasons we reunited the churches was because I would go to the old church in San Bernardino, and I wanted to be in the choir, so I wanted to sing. And the girl that I was telling you was doing music. Because I left, she now had to step up. She stepped up, did a choir, blah blah blah, and I want to be part of that. So I would go there a lot, and the connections started reunifying. There was no bad blood, but it was just not interaction. But now the interaction happened weekly, and we would meet and we would have the same, prayer sessions and singing. And it ended up being that because of that, it was absolutely absurd to be apart. So we reunited the churches. But it was part of that, not because of me, but because of the many of us from that church came to this church, and we had separate orchestras and separate choirs and whatnot. But I liked the way they did it here, so I came here, and it was a natural tie-in. So then
Yeah,
we reunited the churches. It was very beautiful to reunite once again.
yeah. No, that's cool. Okay, well, that's good to know that that did happen. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. Okay. So, I guess moving in sort of a different era, let's talk a little bit about obviously a big part of your life was Mission One. But before I jump into that, I know at this point, let's say when you started working with Mission One, were you already sort of on your career path, or are those in parallel, or how can you?
No. Yeah, of course. I was still in college, and going back to Sacramento, that faithful Sacramento meeting, after 3 days of being together, we had a park day. And after the park day, again, it was new ground. Nobody's ever been at the park or been, churches never did this together. This was 1995, I believe. It was the first time of a sort of meeting of its kind. So at the park, we're playing, it was great. And I don't know what happened, what came over me at the end. It was getting dark. We had to leave, and nobody was doing anything like organizational wise. It was kind of a hodgepodge of just go out the park and run around, you know? So I called everybody to get them, make a big circle. So I grabbed everybody. Hey, grab somebody by the hand. I've never done that publicly, by the way. And I was very shy, but I just started speaking. Grab somebody by the hand. Let's do this, circle. All right, let's pray. So we prayed. And then after the prayer, I don't know what came over me. I'm like, next year I'm going to see you in California, in Southern California. We're doing this again in Southern California. This was 1995. So now I'm like, oh shoot, I said it. And then I went home and I was like, dude, we're still at the old church at this point, and I had like 5 people. Ironically, at this old church in the city of Colton, the Baptist there are very, very close friends, and the Baptist pastor, Livio Petrila, was mentoring me. And I told him I kind of feel like, we're in a small church, we can't do much. And he told me, hey, a piano player and 12 people can change the world. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's all, Jesus had 12 disciples. Anyways, he spoke all sorts of wise things, like that, just fun things. I'm like, cool, man. A dude with a piano and 12 friends can do a lot. So when I came back, I'm like, now I told those guys in Sacramento, but we didn't have telephones back then. It was all like landlines. We had no internet. Like, there's no way to communicate with those people, but somehow they're going to come to Southern California. So I kind of, God just, drugged me along, and I talked to Livio Petrila. We got his church on board. I talked to a couple of young people here. I go, guys, let's make the conference. So that's how Mission One started, out of a
Mm-hmm.
need and out of somebody opening their mouth when they shouldn't have on a field in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got the best people that I knew at the time. Anybody that would sing drums or piano or whatever, I walked up to them and I said, hey, we're doing this. Meet us at the time we met at Mimi's Cafe. So I set up a meeting, and we had 30 young people, leaders, movers and shakers. Nobody worked with each other at the time. So I'm like, we got to work together because we got to put a conference together. They're like, really? I'm like, yeah. So I was an organizer all of a sudden, but I had no interest to organize, if that makes sense. And ironically, I didn't even play piano or sing keyboard initially. I was just organizing the events. I got better piano players, better musicians of all kinds from the Baptist church, the Pentecostal church. I went to every church and I recruited the best, 2, 3 from each one. And that's how we started Mission One. And we rented a university, and we had our first event.